I have the honor of presenting to you Dr. Janice S. Ellis. She won with an amazing book last year. She wrote an incredible story of growing up on a cotton farm in Mississippi. And now she has another book that she's going to be talking about. She's going to be talking about how important it is for authors to engage with important issues of our day. So Dr. Ellis, I turn it over to you.
Okay, Janice, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Can you see me? You
can see you.
Me?
Yep.
Okay, let's see if I know how to do this.
We're all learning here. So.
Okay, so let me do my, can you see that?
Yes, we can. We're going to go hide now.
Okay. Now do you still see the slide?
Yes, great.
And hopefully just the slide, correct?
We see a nice photo of you on the side. It's perfect.
Yes.
Okay, but I can't see that. So bear with me. I don't know how I can see myself, but it doesn't matter. Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. This session is a little different from some of the other great sessions that we've had the last few days. It is not about how to write or market or sell our books, but in this session, we will focus on why. Why do we bother? My goodness, ultimately, what is the goal, or goals for that matter, for spending such a big chunk of our lives, you know, to put whatever thoughts we have in our heads into a book for people to then spend their time and read. So I can say that, you know, we might say we like to write, or we might say we're very good at writing, and all that may be true, but what is the higher purpose of us writing? What is the higher purpose? And that is what we're going to deal with in the next several minutes. The goal for the session, even though, you know, we're virtual and we have the chat and the Q&A feature, I hope we have a conversation, you know, share experiences and exchange ideas. And when I say that, feel free, and Sean, if I'm speaking out of turn, correct me here, but feel free that if I am cryptic, as I can be, in describing something, then maybe feel free to go to the chat or ask a question, and Sean, feel free to interrupt me. Is that okay? Hello?
Yeah, no problem, Janice.
We got you. Janice, you got Sharon and Kipper here.
Okay, and I'm not seeing myself, so I don't know if I look crazy or what, but anyway.
No, you're gorgeous.
The question is, you know, why? Why do we engage in the tough and hard business of writing? And I don't know about you, but my life, I felt compelled to do it. And my husband has this joke about me being a social worker. I walk into a radio station, I ask them for time for my commentary, or I walk into a newspaper office and say, would you please print this? And I come back all excited. Oh, honey, I got a spot on the radio, 2 minutes, and they're gonna run my column every other day in the newspaper, whatever. And he would say, and what do they pay? And I would say, oh, I didn't ask. And I would not have asked, you know, because that's not why I have written most of my life and my career for the last 4 decades. My late mother, who died a couple of years ago at the ripe young age of 101, with all of her faculties. She was physically slowing down, but she always said she used the walker for security and not because she needed it. But she always said to me, I was driven. And quite honestly, being one of 7 children, I didn't always know whether or not that was a compliment or not. But as the years have gone by, I've accepted the fact that I am driven. I'm driven to try to say to whomever will listen or to whomever will read, let's think about this. Let's see what we can do to make this better. So why do I write? Well, not only to entertain and captivate and inform and all those noble things, to educate, but I write to inspire, to empower, to motivate. My first book, which won the Journey Award, which I'm so honored still to this day, last year at Chanticleer, in search, From Liberty to Magnolia, in Search of the American Dream. While it's the story of my life, my struggles, my triumphs, it also tells a story that millions of Americans can relate to in one way or another. Given I call them my indelible birthmarks, being Black and being a woman in America, there is so much real life drama for me to write about. So therefore, I became a nonfiction author. And I felt and still feel that I need to write about some aspect of life in America, not just for Blacks and women, but to enlighten all who care to know about and see the total tapestry of America. What you see in the photograph there, the first building on the left is my dad's smokehouse, where he smoked his meats when I was a little girl. And the other building is a crib where he really housed the corn that he gathered. So this book is about my life and what it was like growing up at a time when there was so much going on. My life, the place of my birth, upbringing, experiences represent a microcosm of what life is like for particularly millions of Blacks, millions of women, and to a lesser extent, other minorities navigating American society during the last 50 years. And really still today. I mean, we see the turmoil in our nation around race and violence and all those things, and really gender equality. I grew up and came of age during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. And you know, that was to improve life all around for African Americans. And as a young adult, I was caught up in the fight for women, the women's liberation movement, and the fight for equal rights. But even today, after 50 years, those are still some enduring issues that we face. And so I still feel like whatever I can lend or whatever insight I can give, whatever motivation I can engender, I still feel that that's my calling. Whether most of you may be aware that even though, for example, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1964, and to this day, you know, there's still a struggle in many places to ensure the right to vote without a lot of unnecessary barriers. You may or may not know that the Equal Rights Amendment passed Congress, every new Congress since 1972. But it still has not been ratified by the required 38 states in order for it to be a part of the Constitution of the United States. So therein lies the challenge. Women still fight for equal pay and so on. And I have had a front row seat to both of those seminal movements. So why do I write? Well, Even though many aspects of my life I share with millions of Americans, there are also some aspects of my life that are very, very unique. And so in my first book, I talk about the place of my birth, my upbringing, the nature of my experiences and that of my family, living in the hotbed of Mississippi. And between two Mississippi towns, the name of my book, From Liberty to Magnolia. My dad's farm, where I was born, a 3-bedroom farm, which I chronicle in the book, was between those two towns with those iconic names of Liberty and Magnolia. When liberty should be, you should be free, free to dream, free to work hard, free to realize your dreams. And if you're, what is your magnolia? What is your sense of beauty? And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the magnolia tree. It's huge. It's like a big oak tree. It's an evergreen, but it has beautiful white blossoms. Well, the little town of Magnolia, where my dad's farm was about 13 miles from it, was lined with those beautiful trees. And so my book is a metaphor, really, of what life really was like in Mississippi for not only my family, but many, many, many families. Life was not free and life was not beautiful as those iconic names demonstrate. But again, my book is a very happy book. Even though it's also painful, I describe living in fear as a child. My dad was active in registering Black to vote, and of course, that wasn't a good thing to do. And so, yes, crosses were burned on my dad's lawn. I had a classmate whose father was killed. I had another classmate whose father was castrated and left in a ditch. But the other thing about books and why we write, books became my friends. They were my escape. They were my comfort during those days. And quite candidly, unknowingly, in studying books and reading as many books as I could, they also not only were my mental escape, but it turned out to be they were my physical escape, because my dad and mom, 7 kids, farm life. My dad supported his family with everything he could raise. And he had a $40 a week factory job and made it clear there was no way he could send any of us to college. Well, I delved into books, and that love of books financed my entire education. So why do I write? Well, you know, we are all shaped by who we are, our place of birth. And the critical question is, you know, irrespective if that's good or bad, the question is, you know, our physical environment, the social, the economic, the political, the cultural, what do we do with that? It all impacts us, but how do we impact those things that are in our environment? And yes, went to segregated schools, but I did the best I could. And I told you about the movements and so on. But the bottom line is, you know, where do you get your sense of self and your sense of purpose? And mine came during experiencing those tough times. And again, my book may be painful in part, my first book, but also very hopeful, because I want to show people from all walks of life, not only Blacks and women and minorities, but people who come from tough circumstances, that you can achieve. And so if you thought, I thought one day I would, at a certain age, I would graduate high school, go to college, earn degrees, I had no idea. Those things appeared impossible and insurmountable to me. But you know, again, I applied myself, I did the best I could, and I was determined that I was not going to accept a life that was defined for me that I did not define for myself. And so I detail a lot of those things in my book. And I also talk about what my journey was, even when those indelible birthmarks came into play. And you know, when dreams meet reality, you're looking at someone who, despite the oppression and of which I grew up in, I believed in all of America's promises. And I thought if I worked hard and I did really good in school and all those things, that I would be able to achieve. Well, we all hit unavoidable collisions, and I hit those in my personal life, and I describe those in my book, again, to motivate women who may be divorced, maybe raising children by themselves, which I did. I divorced when my sons were 2 and 4. I had just gotten out of graduate school without my degrees. I had both masters, but not my PhD. But the bottom line is you can achieve irrespective of where you are. And of course, unavoidable collisions, you know, again, writing was never my full-time job. I've been a government executive, working for a mayor of a major city in this nation, a corporate executive in the pharmaceutical industry. And in all of those instances, I ran into some avoidable collisions. My race and my gender came into play. And I can tell firsthand, for example, that the ceiling is not glass. You can shatter glass. It's breakable. But plexiglass, you can beat, you can hit, you might create a splatter in the glass, in the plexiglass, but it's very, very hard to break. And so that is what I show, but I also show again how hopeful, how you navigate those challenges and those collisions, if you will. But the point is determination. You know, why do you go through things? Why do you keep achieving? That was the purpose and is the purpose of why I have written books and columns, commentary, and why I still write. In writing my first book, again, it was really to go beyond myself. Just myself was going to be an illustration of what I would like decent, fair-minded Americans, America as a nation, to appreciate and show the downfalls of being enslaved to our own sense of freedom. Imagine if we embrace people of all stripes of life. Imagine what talent and what they can contribute to our economy, our social life, our culture. We see it on a great scale now, but it could be even greater if women, people of color were extended the same opportunities as everyone. And so my book is for not only Blacks and women, but for caring citizens who, in their own power, if they're concerned about Americans' children, people from all walks of life, racist, non-racist, sexist, non-sexist, people who have the will and the courage to say, you know, I raised my hand. I'm going to see what I can do in my little orbit of influence, my community, to make a difference. And how do I do that? It's dedicated to parents, teachers, policymakers, social and human rights activists, journalists, business leaders, faith leaders, because caring Americans working together can break the chain of sexism and racism. And I know today it seems very far off in the environment that we're in, but again, we're not to get discouraged. We are to still put our talents to the plow, if you will, to try and make that difference. And so that first book was dedicated to women and girls who believe they can be mothers, good lovers, good career women, and yet also make a good contribution to improve society. And I know that you can't write a book for everyone. And so I'm writing it for those men and women who really honestly and embrace the fact that, you know, people aren't limited by their color or their gender. Those aren't deficits or they're assets. They're not negatives, they're positives. And for those, you know, groups that have been stigmatized or marginalized because they, quote, belong to a minority, I'm here to say that we all belong to a minority of one kind or the other. We all are not doctors. We all aren't French. We all are not from Germany. We all are not from Russia. We're not Black. So no matter where you fit, you're a part of a minority in some way, whether it's based on wealth, middle class, I mean, all the labels that we see. And so it's something to embrace. And my job, my purpose in writing is to help us try to embrace our differences and know that we're better together than separate. And so that was my first book. Now, I also added in that book, Why Do I Write? I think it should be helpful. You know, there's a discussion guide to help book clubs, classes, group forums along the way if they choose to try to tackle these difficult subjects. Then they have some tools, and I wrote the tools based on the chapters in real detail of my book. So why do you write? Obviously, we all want to captivate readers, we want to entertain, and we want to make a lot of money. But why do you write? And you know, what is the ultimate purpose? Whether it's fiction or nonfiction. When we sit down to write, we do not approach the page with a blank slate. Even though when we have writer's block, we feel like we are. I've looked at a page, you know, just grabbing at me for many times. But we have to dig deep and let our realities and our imagination take over. But most of all, you know, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, why and how do we think our written words will have an impact? How will they make a difference? That is really the question that I'm sure we all have. And I'm maybe preaching to the choir, but whether it's nonfiction or authors or it's just a matter of where we go back, where we go to get our fodder, as they say, or get our grist, or get our information. And for you know, nonfiction authors, obviously it's the past, present, future, reality, realistic, often societal, and often personal, and many others. I mean, I can't name them all, but we have somewhere where we go dig deep to get the substance for the work that we are trying to achieve. And for fiction writers, oh, there are days I envy fiction writers because you're limited only by your imagination. You can do past, present, future. You can do historical things. You can do so many things. Science fiction, you know, I look back at 2001, Space Odyssey, a lot of the old science fiction movies and stories and books, and you know, they foretold of what we are dealing with today. So, you know, again, you know, whether it's your fiction or nonfiction, you know, you have a purpose, and you just have to figure out long-term, whether it's a short-term purpose or long-term purpose. I generally like to write for the long term. I have columns that I wrote in the 80s that are still relevant for today. I remember a newspaper editor telling me that I write evergreens, and I think that's good. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we also know the pros and cons about how hard this is. And we've heard about that the last 3 or 4 days, about how difficult it is. You know, it's forever changing. But the opportunities are there. We just, as writers who are determined to get our message out, we've just got to be flexible and willing to learn and willing to do what it is necessary to fulfill our purpose as to why we write. But the power of written books, the power of words, we think that too many people, I think, in society today think that conflict and violence get us to where we want to be. Fake news, distortions, zealots, but it really doesn't. The power of books and words, the power of words to inform, educate, entertain, do all these things and more. And many of our works, you know, they perform combinations of these things. But it doesn't matter whether you write fiction or nonfiction, your books can fulfill a needed and valuable purpose in many, many, many ways. Whether it's informing, self-help, exposing, educating, inspiring, entertaining, pushing the imagination, and limitless possibilities, discovering solutions, new horizons, you know, when the intent and the motivation overall is to improve society at the end of the day. When a child picks up a fantasy book, when someone picks up a book on horror or whatever, what at the end of the day, what is it do we want to achieve? Sean mentioned that my book, my current book, Shaping Public Opinion, How Real Advocacy Journalism Should Be Practiced. I'm honored. It was selected as a first place finalist for the Nellie Bly Journalism Award. And Nellie Bly was a fighter. She wrote about the issues of her day. And I was so honored to sorry, I was so honored to be selected in her class. So thank you, Chanticleer. That was wonderful. But I also have 2 other books that I'm working on. I have to tell you a little bit of a story about these. I submitted a book, a manuscript to Brill, which is one of the largest and oldest academic publishers and general publishers in the world, international publisher. They've been publishing since the 1600s. And luckily, I sent them a manuscript and they were interested. So they sent the manuscript out for reviews, which is their process. And 2 of the 3 reviewers came back and said, this is a good book, but there are 2 books in this one book. So they sent it back to me and asked if I would be willing to carve out the 2 books. At first, the book was about my lessons from Walter Lippmann. I need to tell you this. My mentors for becoming an advocate journalist were mentors in absentia, and they were white men, by the way. Eric Sevareid, I don't know how many of you remember Eric Sevareid from the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. I first saw Eric Sevareid when I would come home from school. My mom and I, when we got a television, I was 11 years old, we would watch the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Sevareid. I mean, religiously. So when John Kennedy was assassinated, Eric Sevareid made his first appearance on the CBS Evening News, and he put that assassination into perspective. And I knew then that it had something to do with the whole quest for equal rights for all Americans. And so I watched Eric Sevareid religiously throughout high school with my mom every evening news. And then when I went to graduate school, I stumbled into Walter Lippmann, who still is considered one of the foremost journalists of the last 100 years in America. And he actually was syndicated in 250 newspapers across the United States and another 50 worldwide. He was credited with single-handedly getting President Lyndon Johnson not to run anymore because he wrote such biting editorials against the Vietnam War. But he didn't write them as a zealot. He did not write them in a biased way. He wrote them in a balanced way, trying to educate the American public about how they needed to view that war. And so in this manuscript, long story short, that I sent Brill, it contained the lessons from Lippmann that I think are very good for journalists today, and for whether they're in the electronic media, print medium, or whatever. And so, but I also talked about how Eric Sevareid and Walter Lippmann had influenced my life and my desire to write whether I would get paid or not. And so I must tell you, this is a short story. When I was writing my dissertation on Walter Lippmann had died just a year before before I wrote my dissertation. I thought, oh my God, I wish I could talk to someone who knew him. And I wrote Eric Sevareid, and I told Eric Sevareid that I used to watch him with my mom every evening after school. And I would tell my mom, someday I'm going to do what Sevareid does. And my mom would say, you're building air castles. Blacks nor women do what Sevareid does. Well, I sent him a letter. By now, I am divorced. I'm 7 years beyond my coursework for my doctorate. I have 2 boys that I'm raising. I'm working for Milwaukee's mayor as his budget specialist, and that's another story. I detail that in my book. And the receptionist calls, so the mayor's in my office, we're going over budget stuff. The receptionist runs in the office and says, Janice, no. She says, I have Sevareid on the line. And the mayor says, what the hell does Sevareid want with me? And Florence says, Mayor, he's not calling for you, he's calling for Janice. I, needless to say, lost it. So after I circled around my desk for a couple of times, Florence said, you can't keep him waiting, Janice. You can't keep Sevareid waiting. I get on the phone, I gain my composure. He invites me to his home in Maryland to talk about Lippman and to talk about his work. So in my book that I sent to Brill, I have these interviews that have never been published. He connected me with James Reston of the New York Times and so on. And so they send the manuscript back to me and told me that I had 2 books. Separate out the lessons from Walter Lippmann, but they needed to have my journey, the making of an advocate journalist. Why did I believe in using word power? Because they think it will be inspirational for other young journalists. And so I spent time reworking those 2 books and 2 manuscripts. And currently they're under review again at Brill. And needless to say, I'm anxiously awaiting word to see what they decide. So, well, that's why I've written and continue to write. I write full-time for the first time in my professional career. I'm able to write full-time. There were times when I was writing for newspaper or radio, I'd be on a plane coming from a conference in the pharmaceutical industry or the National League of Cities, and I would be writing commentary on a cocktail napkin if I inadvertently shipped my pad or my computer. So I currently now write online, and I will write until I can't write anymore. So that's it. I don't know if there are questions or comments, but that's my story. And I know you have a story to tell as well as to why you write.
Hey. Oh, hi. You got Janice up there. Hey.
Hi.
Hi. So I just want to pull out some of the comments that were coming on through the chat room about it being inspirational. Let's see here if I can't find this.
So proud of you.
They're so proud of you. I hope to meet you in person someday. Very inspirational. Kizzy says, Janice, I hope you have lots of room in your life for a lot of new best friends.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Let's see here. Carolyn, I hope to meet you in person someday. Very inspirational. Jackie says, thanks so much, Janice. I said, I am so glad we are recording this because I want to hear this again.
Oh my. And I probably would be afraid to look at it because I would think, oh, you were acting wild.
Oh, no.
I didn't see myself.
And MJ says, I personally relate to your journey. Anna Karna says, I love you.
Oh, oh my goodness.
So lots of people on here listening, and they said your journey from Liberty to Magnolia, fabulous, grand prize. She's modest, so she didn't say she won the grand prize.
And there's my ribbon. You see my ribbon? Can you see my ribbon?
I can see it. I was like, yes, yes. I know. Yeah, I love it. Sometimes people like ribbons. Really, I'm like, really, ribbons, because you know, when you're at a book fair or something, you put that ribbon up there, people just gravitate to the blue ribbon.
Yeah,
they do. So yeah. And when I saw your book here today, the being an advocate, it's so needed. Like today, that's one reason why I planned this today is of course 9/11.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's a very momentous day. And then when you add on all of everything that's going on now, all the different challenges, the turbulent times, the COVID that's going on out here on the West Coast, we've got, you know, wildfires. And then but last week, I think y'all were having, back east, they're having tornadoes and things. So it's just all of this sort of compacted.
Yes.
And then when you add the pressures of underlying issues that we deal with women, you know, what is it, the same sky, but it's very different. Same planet, different world that we live in, but it's the same planet.
Yes.
And I love how you put how we all have our different things, and this is, you know, how do you go about that? So
and do it without becoming bitter. Like I wrote a commentary today about when 9/11 hit, you know, I think we all forgot our political views. We became one, and so many people died there, and yet, you know, we forget the things that we share.
Yes, yeah, and I agree. We need to unite and share and be supportive, and yes, totally. And as I said all day today, whenever I was telling people about your session coming up, I said, you know, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yes, yes, always. I mean, that's the greatest tool we have, and we just forget it, and if we don't, we use it in the wrong way sometimes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I love with Eric Severide. That's a great story.
Yeah.
And I grew up, we're probably about the same in the same eras and things, and yeah, totally different. I came from my dad was Marine, so I was a military brat, and we lived in base housing. Well, the military, way back long ago, the Stone Age, when I was in first grade, and all that, is that Dad was a sergeant, enlisted, so they had already decided that the military has to be integrated, right? And so we were integrated. We lived next door to each other in base housing. We went to dances together. We played, you know, soccer, which nobody played soccer in the South. It's like, are you a communist? Only communists play soccer. Of course, it's football, but yeah. So we had all of that, and then he retired, and because he wanted me to go to high school in their hometown, which is Greensboro, North Carolina, which of course is where so many historic events happened.
Yes.
And A&T University, yeah, just on and on. And I went there, and my class, Greensboro was the last holdout city, I believe, in North Carolina to do integration. So I was integrated into Dudley High School, which was the all-black high school then. And then all this I had never experienced it. I went from that to everybody to the segregated world, and it was like I landed on a different planet somewhere. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, a shock.
Yeah, pretty much a shock. So, I mean, not that I'm equating what I've been through, but it's just, just even that little bit that I dealt with was
Sure.
crazy. And to think about how far you've come from just, I've seen it with my own eyes, what that can be like, especially in some parts of the South.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And you know, throughout my book, I talk about even in my coming books. I mean, in reality, you know, you can't harbor. You know, you can't hold things. My dad was a World War II veteran. He was a Navy. Uh, um, uh, he was in the Navy on an aircraft carrier in Hawaii when they bombed Pearl Harbor, and he would say, baby, I knew that was going to be my resting place. I mean, he was a cook. He was in the bowels of the aircraft carrier. And I'm going to tell you how I learned to cook steaks. One day he said to me, baby, you are not cooking that steak correctly. If I had given that, you have to get the grill hot enough and you flip it. If I had given a charred steak to my commander, he'd have thrown it at me. And so, but that was his experience. He was in the Navy during World War II. I had a brother who served in the Vietnam War. I have a brother who was a career Marine. And at the end of the day, they all came back and they share their experiences. But I took that to mean, there's work to be done. You know, you don't judge a whole race of people by the few. And and so therefore I feel like I have to continue to write all my life. And that's not all I write about. I mean, I try to take everyday experiences like today. My commentary today is about, you know, America is great at coming together. You know, we just have to remember how we do that and don't feel threatened by what we see, you know.
Yes, and come together. I so agree. And that was my dad. Dad was World War II, Korean War, in Vietnam. My brother did like 15 years. He's 100% disabled vet. I lost dad in 1981. Yeah. So yeah, I am. Yes, it's very different once you have that in the family. So I appreciate everyone out there. Are there any questions? I'll just sit here chit chatting all the time with all this, but these are important issues. Let's see, here's something from D. I would like to meet you one day too, to actually collaborate. My first memory at 3 years old as a white child was the KKK coming to burn our house down. Were you ever visited by the white sheets?
Oh yes, my dad, as I said, had a $40 a week job. He made $1 an hour, and he had to do the night shift, which meant what he did was we farmed the farmland during the day, and so my dad would get up at 5:30 as the rest of us kids, work the farm until about noon, take a nap, and then go to this factory job. Well, when he started to help register Black people to vote, the Klan burned a cross on my dad's lawn, and to the point where my mom would wake up my brothers, I had 4 brothers, to send them to the end of the roadway to our little house, so that when Dad was dropped off at the road, they would be there so that no one else would be lying in wait for him. They burned crosses at the church where my dad and the men in the community met to organize the voting registrations drives. And that church was about, I would say, 2 city blocks from my farm. We actually would walk through the pathway to Sunday school on Sundays. And yes, you know, I talk about in my book how I had a classmate whose father really was sort of the impetus behind the voters registration drive. And I don't know if you saw the Freedom Riders PBS special some years ago. Well, he was featured. He was killed for registering people to vote by a legislator who was a member of the Klan. And so yes, and uh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like I said, Dee, like I said, she's a white child, but I guess they were helping or aligning with probably trying to help with voter
Yes.
registration and that sort of
Yes, and let me say one other thing, which I don't know how I could forget this, but I went to Tougaloo College, and if you do any research around the civil rights movement in Mississippi, you'll know that Tougaloo College was the headquarters where Martin Luther King, Julian Bond, and all of those would come to organize the marches in Jackson, Mississippi. Well, when I started my undergraduate work at Tougaloo College, and the dorm, the Klan circled our dorm, the girls' dorm, and we were petrified. And then in my sophomore year, when King was assassinated, I felt I had to do something. So I went across the way and helped to integrate Millsaps College, which I describe in my book. And there were 6 of us, Black girls. And this is, I talk about this in my book too, about skin color, if you're light skinned Black versus dark skinned Black, and how there's a caste system and a status thing among Blacks. And I think to some degree back then among whites. But my dorm mother, my roommate and I were the darkest of the 6 women in the dormitory. She took us into her quarters to hide us when the Klan circled the dorm at Millsaps College. And so, yeah, I've had a little bit of experience with them.
Yeah. Let's see, we've got some more comments here. Oh yes, my dad was, this is what he would say, was paying a Black craftsman the same wage as a white builder. That was why they burned a cross at the yard. So let's see, here's one from Julie. Your nonfiction period story. How do you make it relatable to a younger audience? The earlier speakers suggested young people are not interested in period stories. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's a real challenge, and I've been fortunate in the sense that I've had book clubs that sort of go the age gamut. I think it's incumbent upon us as writers to figure out a way to re-engage young people, because honestly, if I'm fearful, because if they don't really understand period pieces and history, then I'm fearful about what kind of leaders they may become in the future, because you can't get around the fact that if you don't know where you've been and know something about your history, then how on earth can you lead in a good and positive direction? So what I try to do, for example, libraries have held book presentations where people have brought their kids, and what I do is I try to talk about it. The first half of my book is about being a girl, a little girl growing up. And so my challenge is to work with librarians, work with book clubs, and try to say this is a story that will be inspiring for kids who may or may not see their way. I mean, the odds of me being where I am today were slim and none. And so I'm fortunate that the schools, and so when I speak to young people, I try to go back to where they are in their age group. Now, writing for them, that I have not done that, except for the descriptions in my book. But for those who write young stories, I mean, I can't advise people what to write, but I believe that we're obligated to write those stories with lasting messages that will help and improve the quality of life and society along the way.
Yeah, and it's you were talking about with sexism too. I remember going to try to buy my first automobile, and they said, well, I needed either, even though I was working full time, I had to either get my husband or my dad to sign the loan, right? And I talked to people, they're like, really? Younger, I'm like, yeah. Women, you didn't get loans, you didn't get mortgages, you didn't, yeah.
No.
And, and I'm old, but I'm not that old.
No. I know. And as a single parent, I was divorced when my boys were 2 and 4, and I ran into that same thing, where I needed a car to get my kids to daycare and to get to work. And I mean, it was a real challenge. I said, look, it ended up the mayor I had to show my check stub and get a letter saying that yes, she actually works and she can afford this car. Yeah, otherwise I would not have gotten the car.
Crazy. Yeah, and it seems so sometimes surreal, but it isn't. And it's not that, and I think that's why The Handmaid's Tale is such a popular show now, because you never know when that's gonna click or flick and we regress. It's not the first time in human history. We've been through dark ages before. So I think, we need to, history, we need to learn from our history, and we need accurate history.
Yes, and when Kirkus reviewed my book, thankfully they said that it is so relevant to 2 issues now, the Me Too movement, because, irrespective of my having 2 masters, a PhD, in corporate America in the pharmaceutical industry, irrespective of my negotiating a $70 million contract between the pharmaceutical company I worked for and one of the larger healthcare providers, I was a director. I never became a vice president. And then finally, I get photos from the CEO at a function that I had gone to where he had actually taken pictures of me. And he said in his little envelope, here's this lovely lady I saw at Jackson Hole that I really cannot get out of my mind. And so I came home and I thought, if I have to sleep with this guy to get promoted, sorry. I have worked, I was with this company for almost 7 years, got outstanding evaluations every quarter, every year, out of a scale where they had unsatisfactory, satisfactory, good, excellent, outstanding. I received outstanding evaluations every quarter I was there and was never promoted.
Yep.
And that was that was less than 20 years ago. So
right. Yes, same planet, different world. We have a comment from Peter Green, as I always kid him, Peter Green with an E. He said, five E's, beyond inspiring. We can all write, but Janice tells us that we have to connect. And if you're going to connect with people, have a real purpose. Thank you so much.
oh geez.
And I think on that, we will take a break. But this was great. Everybody, this is going to be recorded so we can go back and listen to it again. And I was a few times, I think Sharon and I were sitting over there going, amen, sister. Yes, yes. You couldn't hear us because Andy has his sound on, but we were like,
And so, let me confess the other thing I should share with you guys. My PhD is in communication. I taught speech writing and all that. I hate it. I get so stressed out. You must know I'm not eating anything today. I get so stressed out. I would much rather just write, and say, read it, just read it. So if I looked wild, it's because this is not my forte.
No, you were inspiring and natural, and like I said, it was just inspirational. So just fabulous, and thank you. And your energy just comes across. You have a real passion for what you do, and we are so proud of you.
Well, thank you.
And,
thank you so much.
Yes.
That makes my day. I will go have a drink.
Very good. And we look forward to seeing you soon again out here.
Yes.
In
I
Villa.
Yes. We were planning our vacation around it, and so on. And Frank loved it. And tell the bellwether they make the best Bloody Marys in the world.
I will. And I know they're missing all of the Chanticleerians. I know that. But here we are doing our social distancing with 5 of us. So there's that. But I think when you get a chance, can you click on your Q&A on your, if you hover?
Right, yes.
And I can give you, oh, you got a thank you from Judy. But Dee went into a little more explanation, but we need to get ready for the syllabus tonight. We have the M&Ms, the Clue, and the Global Thrillers tonight. So that is pretty good. I can send you her email, or send you so y'all can carry on that conversation. But these are important issues for today and tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey. All right. So everyone, we will be back here at 5 o'clock. We've got about 30 some minutes, and we look forward to seeing you. Yeah, boy, I got chill bumps, so that is really good. See you soon, and listen for the rooster crowing.